You're listening to the Digital Deep Dive, where we tackle the newest trends, strategies, and pain points shaping growth across the digital landscape. From Amazon and D2C to international expansion, join our host and e-commerce leaders across multiple industries for in-depth discussions on how to maximize your brands in the digital arena. Now, here's your host, Aaron Conant.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to Digital Deep Dive Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Conant. We took a couple weeks off over Turkey 5. Just way too many things going on during that time frame, but glad to be back here today. And today we're going to tackle, Walmart.com ecosystem. This is a topic that comes up over and over again. We do a lot in the Amazon space, and everybody's looking for, hey, what's next? And Walmart has always been hanging out there. And so with kind of this, time where I have a lot of people reevaluating their direct-to-consumer sites, but still looking for growth, obviously Walmart comes up a ton. And so got connected with Michael Lebhar here at SellCord from a bunch of different people in the network. Come to find out, we have a ton of different connections across the board, and had a fantastic conversation. It was just one of those ones where like, hey, we need to get this word out. He's one of the foremost authorities in this space, and it's just helping a ton of brands. So I thought, hey, let's bring him on and kind of do a deep dive on the Walmart.com ecosystem. But Michael, I'll kick it over to you. Do you want to do like a brief intro on yourself and SellCord? That would be awesome. And then we can kind of jump into the conversation. Sound good?
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for having me. It's cool to be here. A little bit about myself. I started selling online in early high school, in between classes, after school, built a brand on Amazon, was able to scale that. Amazon allowed us to build this really strong brand. Why don't we just expand it to a lot of other platforms? So we started selling on a lot of other platforms. Pretty soon noticed that like Walmart was the only other one that was giving us really significant volume. So I'm like, what about if we took the same approach we took to Amazon to Walmart, like really understand the intricacies of the platform, understand how it works, understand the algorithm, understand the best practices. And, we became the number one in our category. Eventually, one of my brands got into Walmart stores nationwide through just having strong .com success. So it was a pretty cool journey. Realized that brands and just the space didn't really understand the Walmart ecosystem well. Some service providers were adding on Walmart services, but Walmart was, different than I think other marketplaces. It's so much of its own beast that there's so much complexities to it, and Walmart's purposely structuring it in a different way than some of the other marketplaces. So you just can't use the same plug and play strategies. And as it grows, those are beginning to work less and less. So realizing that like we've launched SellCord, which we're actually a Walmart exclusive focused agency. We only focus on Walmart. And, there's more than enough within Walmart. There's so many moving pieces, and, that allowed us to really become the leader in the space. We're, one of the closest partners for Walmart. We're approved agency partners, API partners, work very closely with them. It's been really cool to be able to help brands. We've worked with a lot of brands that aren't Amazon or D2C and want to expand to Walmart, to just grow another channel. Like that's been really cool. We've been working a lot with brands who've been working with Walmart forever. And now they're having this challenging of all these new marketplace listings, taking away a lot of their sales, and them having to adapt with Walmart Connect and not having the proper resources and the proper understanding how to properly do that. So we've been helping in that side of things. A lot of brands that want to get into stores, Walmart's now telling them you have to focus on .com. So we've been working with a lot of different things, and it's been really cool to just work so closely with brands and help a lot of them.
Yeah, this is going to be a fun conversation because when we were talking before, the approach that you have is something it's really interesting because a lot of people took their Amazon strategy and they just tried to dump it over to Amazon, and they said, hey, or to Walmart, and they said, hey, well, Amazon's doing it best, so they have it all figured out. So let's take everything we're doing with Amazon, put it into Walmart, and then there was lower than expected results. And so they're like, oh, from their standpoint, well, Walmart's not quite advanced because if they were, in neither here nor there, they're not far enough along. We're not going to have a growth channel here. Let's just go back and focus on Amazon. Or the other thing that I see happening a lot is people are doing great on Amazon and paid media is taking off, and then they just go take the exact, they use the same partner to go launch Walmart, ads on Walmart.com. And, the conversation that we're having, which is I think we're going to get to, is like, just like on Amazon, if you don't fundamentally address everything within the ecosystem according to Amazon, when you get to the media standpoint, it all falls apart. And the same thing is with Walmart, right? And Walmart is unique, and tackling all that back end stuff is going to be what allows you to succeed when you go into retail media. And so I would say to people, just because you've tried Walmart, media in the past and it hasn't performed, I would say don't consider that just because Walmart can't get it to work. You might just have to adjust your strategy and how you're dealing with the inside of Walmart.com to enable the success of the paid media. So that being said, I'm going to kind of start off with a broad question of, the title of this episode, understanding the Walmart.com ecosystem. Like, where do we even start to try to peel back that onion? And I want to step away from the media side at first, if we can, and say, how do people need to think about it as an ecosystem? And if we can peel back the layers on that onion, that would be awesome. And I'm just going to randomly throw out questions, but from your side, if you have questions for me, don't ever hesitate to throw them back. I love this to be, an open conversation as a whole.
Awesome. Yeah. So that's a great question. I wish I could kind of do it on a whiteboard, but I'm going to try to kind of unpeel it in the best way I can, where I think of Walmart ecosystem in a few different ways. And I think it's really important to understand a few things about Walmart, right? So Walmart's the largest retailer in the world, obviously, right? They're also the second largest marketplace in the US, and they're the fastest growing marketplace in the US, right? So those three kind of data points are, I think, really important. I think another data point that's really important is that Walmart has around 120 million unique visitors on their site monthly, and they also have around 100,000 sellers, a little over 100,000 sellers, compared to like the 10 plus million on Amazon. So that just kind of gives you context of the size of Walmart, how much .com means to them, and what the competition's like on .com.
Really quick. So if we just dig into that a little bit, because a lot of people have issues on Amazon with, the number of, whether not just third-party resellers, but just the number of third-party sellers selling products. So when you look at Walmart, is it easier then just because there's fewer?
Yeah. So when I look at Walmart, I think that's one of the biggest opportunities where don't have to outrank an unlimited amount of people. There's much less competition, which also affects obviously retail media, the bidding, the cost of advertising, a lot of the other tactics that go on within the platform, a lot of less shady players, a lot of things like that, because of just the level of sellers. You're just competing with way less. And yes, of course, you're competing, there's less total sales. I think Walmart.com business does around 80 something billion a year. Still very significant. And that's grown every year in the past. So for the past few years, like that's grown significantly every single year. So there's much less competition in general. And I think that's where a lot of the opportunity comes from. I always say, like, one of the first products we launched was workout gloves, probably 8 years ago that I launched. And I always say, like, if I just would have launched a few other products, then I would have been retired. So I think it's like with Walmart, it's like the earlier you come on that obviously makes a really big difference. So that's been actually interesting.
Yeah, there's a ton of concern about, when Walmart opened up the marketplace to a ton more third-party sellers, that it was going to explode and just turn into Amazon. And there's a lot of concern. I know there's certain categories, but interesting to put some numbers to it as a whole, that it doesn't really compare at this point in time to the number on Amazon. Okay, awesome.
Awesome. Yeah. So the way kind of Walmart, a lot of people might know this, but is there's a couple components to it. There's the in-store business, right? And within the in-store business, there's the items that are on the shelf, right? And then there's also pickup and delivery, right? Where people can purchase on their app, on the site, to pick up within store. And then there's items that are actually on shelf in store that people come in and purchase in store. So for those in-store items, people can walk in, purchase, or they can order it on the app for pickup and delivery, right? That's kind of where a lot of the business is done, and that's kind of the core what a lot of people know Walmart for. Now Walmart has, on the .com side, a few other kind of categories, right? So they have something which I call 1P, what we call 1P owned, right? Where it's on .com, people order it to be shipped to their house. It's me as a seller to sell the product to Walmart. Walmart lists it on their site chooses the retail. They choose the retail, and they ship it to the customers. It comes from their DCs. they own the inventory. Usually that's owned by merchants. So usually, and the merchants are at Walmart responsible for those items. So a lot of times they're not going to purchase items that don't do good volume. And when they're responsible for those items, they're usually doing a decent amount to help push them and make sure they're shown on high results, right? And then what you have is DSV, right? Which is in a similar fashion. It's on Walmart.com. It shows sold and shipped by sold by Walmart, but it's dropship vendor, meaning that I, as a seller, list the products, but Walmart, when an order comes in, it ships from my warehouses, right? And the thing about dropship vendors, some context about that program used to be much, much bigger for Walmart. They're shrinking down that program a lot, and they want most of those sellers to go into marketplace. A lot of categories, you'll see it more often than not. First of all, we've seen better performance in a lot of instances with marketplace because you could be part of their fulfillment network. But one of the big things is now that DSV has less resources, don't have as much support from Walmart, right? They're not going to care as much about the listing, so they're not going to promote as much. You're not going to do promotions as much with you and things like that. You're just going to have way less kind of leverage within that environment. But there's still a ton of volume done in DSV. We manage some of the largest DSV vendors. There's still a lot of volume there, but a lot of them are moving over a lot of their business to marketplace.
So when we think about on the vendor side then, and I'm going to do a lot of comparisons back to Amazon, there's a traditional, 1P side, and they're buying wholesale, and they set the price and they resell. One of the big issues that happens there is, unless you're a massive brand, and even now if you are, sometimes you don't get access to somebody who's helping you actually solve. How does the Walmart side compare? If you're engaged and you're on the 1P side, they're buying it. Are these vendor managers, or I don't know what they're called within Walmart, are they more engaged than on the Amazon side, or is it going to be pretty typical? And then on the dropship, I mean, Amazon has something, very, very similar, but you're saying, Walmart is trying to push that just to, as long as you're drop shipping, push it to a marketplace. Is that just because they don't want to have the inventory liability, or they just love the marketplace model where they just take a cut? So there's two different questions there. So I guess if I back up, on the 1P side, what does that interaction look like with Walmart?
Perfect. So on the interaction with Walmart, you do have more support from within Walmart because whoever is buying the item from you, the merchant at Walmart's buying the item from you, owns the P&L for that item, and he cares for it to be successful. That being said, it's a good opportunity. It's a really good opportunity to have 1P items. So they're expecting you to not have to rely on them too much. Like, they have a lot to do. They're expecting you to have the right resources internally, or use partners, brokers, whatever the case might be, is to help make sure that that's streamlined, so they don't have to kind of nudge you on a lot of things. To that question, to the question on Walmart moving, how DSV works, and why they're planning on kind of moving a lot of sellers. It's less from like an inventory ownership liability, because the way DSV is structured, it's still within sellers' inventory and they're not purchasing too much. They just constantly purchase. The reason why is marketplace is just a much more scalable model for them. DSV has to be owned by certain merchants, right? So I want to call it like a merchant, and they have to own that item. They have to be, and they have to work with their sellers on it. Marketplace is a much more scalable model for them. And I think the really interesting thing about Walmart is that Walmart knows that they're behind Amazon, but they know that they have this superpower of their retail business and their retail relationships. Like, Walmart's a relationship-based company, and those relationships are really strong, and they could leverage those relationships to help fuel their marketplace. So it also comes from that, where they're realizing that if they want to fuel their marketplace sales, fuel their marketplace business, if they transition a lot of these vendors that would normally not, like some of the clients we work with, like they would never consider a marketplace model, right? Like, they don't sell marketplace on other accounts. Like, they just don't consider that type of model. With Amazon, they just work 1P, but they're willing to do it because of the relationship with Walmart, right? Willing, or kind of twisted arm willing, but whatever the case is, like they're doing that because of that. So it's another reason why Walmart's using that and pushing that.
Yeah. It's interesting, because I know there's a lot of people on the Amazon side trying to go more to the marketplace, and if you're a larger company, Amazon's pulling that back, right? Which is just super interesting when they're crapping out your ASINs, and you just want to take them to a marketplace. You repackage, bundle, get it to a better sell price, and Amazon saying no. And then you have the flip side where you've got, Walmart pushing vendors down this path. Actually, we would rather have you at marketplace and control it all, which I think is actually a great model. Let them be in control, especially for the lower, ASP items. So, awesome.
Awesome.
Well, what's next on the onion is we peel it back. I jumped in there. My guess is we're jumping in the marketplace side.
Yep. So marketplace, the fun one. So marketplace is obviously it's a marketplace. It's one thing important. Most people know it's on a separate platform, right? So everything else is hosted on Retailing that we spoke about. This is hosted on something called Seller Center, right? You have a separate application for it. You have to apply for it. We could include an application in the description link that helps kind of expedite to get applications approved. But you could apply there. Once you apply and you have your account set up, it's in Seller Center. You have full control of everything. Very simply, there's no monthly cost. Like Amazon, it's just you pay 15% commission. Some categories are a little bit less commission. Rates especially as well. So the way Marketplace works is there's a few components of it. You list your products on Marketplace. From there, there's something called WFS, which is their fulfillment program. Over 90% now, or I think it's 85 actually still, percent of the top items on Walmart.com are part of the WFS network. So that's basically similar to Amazon FBA. The program's expanding like extremely rapidly. And it's a great program, has a lot of great features. And that allows you to have 2-day shipping, as well as, quick shipping, quick delivery, but Walmart also increase your rank by just being part of that program. So that's WFS. And
that is this really quick. So that's similar to FBA where you're sending your inventory in. There's probably a holding cost for it. But again, it's part of 2-day delivery. They're individually pick, pack, shipping your product out, so you don't have to. And is that kind of
and getting it to customers quicker. So yeah, that's very similar to FBA. I would say in a lot of ways almost identical. So costs are really great. It's a great program and it's growing really fast. They just introduced like big and bulky items and multi-box. So they're moving really quick on it. They're adding fulfillment centers all over the US. So it's definitely a great program. And that's kind of Marketplace. With that, now I think one thing to kind of understand, now we know some of the pieces, some things to understand about it is that Marketplace sellers, anybody could come list most of their products as long as it's not a restricted item. I would say it's like you want to list as many products as you can. Oftentimes, there's no cost of listing products. So a lot of times you'll be surprised by the items that'll do a lot of the volume. From there, what's really interesting is, and sellers come in, right? Let's say they're in store. They have a 1P.com business, but they have more items, right? So you're a 1P vendor, you have more items. You want to get them into Walmart stores, or you want to get them to their 1P.com program. We're finding is the most effective way is to actually launch those items on Marketplace, show some traction with those items, and then pitch it to the buyer, right? So that's kind of one way how these interact with each other. If you actually have other variations, so let's say you sell a certain flavor in store, you want to sell the other variations, like a lot of merchants are selling, a lot of sellers are actually selling those on Marketplace. If you're a brand that wants to get into stores eventually, you're not a 1P vendor, like we're seeing the most effective way is you have to launch on Marketplace, show success, and then get into kind of stores. So we're seeing like a lot of it just be a full circle where it's tied together for a lot of vendors. And then for a lot of vendors, it's completely separate. Like they just want to sell on Marketplace. That's the only goal. And it's a great program for that. But I think it's important to understand that these programs are integrated in a lot of ways, but also run on their own.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting scenario then, kind of what you're saying from a Walmart launch, because it used to be in a lot of cases, if you weren't a massive company, you needed a rep group to come in, right? And who knew the buyer, and they would go in and pitch it and, prove that this new item that the old item you're replacing, you're going to move more at a higher, profit margin, and it's going to be amazing. Then, I'm thinking if I'm a brand and I do have a rep group like that in place, like, is your advice to tell them like, hey, like tell the rep group to get it on Marketplace, or is it to go straight to the brand and say, hey, get this on marketplace? Because
yeah, so some rep groups will support .com. Just from my experience, and don't shit on any rep group, it's just their experience is with in-store business, and they're trying to learn the .com and how it plays in. So a lot of them are not the most experienced in driving real volume on .com and being able to build a good story that way. So, we work with a lot of brands who work with rep groups, and, to be their .com side, a lot of times brands doing it internally will perform better than out of their rep groups doing it, but it's all see case by case. To touch on your point though, like you used to need a rep group. I think, and I've seen this, is if you're a brand that is doing well on .com and you're able to show good .com performance, there's a lot of ways how you could get into Walmart by yourself without a rep group, and how that kind of opens up the door for that is also really interesting. Now, there's still a lot of advantages to using rep groups and how they could support with on that process, but it is really interesting that it's democratizing it a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I mean, if you can show, really rapid sales adoption, performance on paid media and investment, I mean, they want to go all in, right? I mean, it actually makes the buyer's job a lot easier.
Yep.
Right? I mean, they don't just have to trust the brand or the rep group. They are trusting the actual buyers, the ratings, the reviews, the sales volume, everything else. I'm like, oh, look at this thing is taking off and everybody loves it. That's what I want on store shelf.
Yep. And also one really key thing is I think people are not understanding this, is that the directive from all the way the highest levels up at Walmart is to grow the marketplace and .com business. So even though for percentage wise of total GMV, it might be, as for a brand, like very small volume, and you're like, why am I investing in this? For Walmart, they're looking at the growth percentage of marketplace and the numbers it's giving. They're judged on their growth, so to say, these merchants and stuff. It makes a really big difference for how their .com business is performing. And if you as a vendor are helping facilitate that for them, then it strengthens the relationships a lot. And it matters a lot. So even if like we have a lot of brands like, oh, it's so insignificant the money we're making on .com, it's still really, really important to do that properly if you're trying to, strengthen your overall relationship with Walmart.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that, this idea of relationship, which has been around forever, that, Amazon, on the vendor manager side is slowly backing off from, right? It is. I think one of the key things that Walmart has to offer is this, the actual relationship aspect.
Yeah.
And
awesome. On that note, like Walmart has this thing that they're people-led, tech-powered, omni-channel retailer. It's like their definition of what they are. And I think it's really, really important to understand that they start with like people-led. Those relationships you'll see it within the marketplace business. Even on Amazon, you got to pay for an account manager at Amazon, that limited levers they can pull. On Walmart, like if you're showing growth, like you'll get an account manager on the advertising side, also on the account management side, that they're there to help you grow, that they're investing in a relationship with you. Like they're understanding your products, understanding the category. Each category is owned by merchants who have responsibility over that category and they're looking to add value. So it's like, it's a real relationship-based company. And if you treat it as such as well, like there's a lot of opportunity there.
Yeah. Awesome. Love it. So, I don't know if there's other stuff on the marketplace side, but this is fun. And thanks for letting me jump in and kind of just pick your brain with, some of the questions I get peppered with all the time.
Awesome. Yeah. On marketplace, I think the other kind of key important thing to know is that it's really important that like it's run a very different way, right, than traditionally how 1P's run or how other marketplaces are run. Like they want things done a certain way, and they have an idea for how they want their catalog on Walmart to look like. They have an idea for how they want the business to be. And based on that is a lot of how things are structured. So if you just plug and play other strategies and tactics into a marketplace business, to some degree, you might work and you might make some sales just because the amount of customers that come to Walmart.com, and you could still, there's lack of competition in a lot of ways. Like you still might make some sales, but that's not how you're going to succeed on Walmart and grow with the platform. I think to grow with the platform, succeed, it's really important to understand the different components that promotions play in, the different components, how advertising plays in, how product ranking works, right? How listing optimization works, how conversion rates on Walmart affect your listing and organic rank. All those components, it's really important to understand the levers that each of them pull. and giving it its own attention, because it's not too complicated. It just you have to give it its own attention. And by doing that, you set yourself up for success on the platform.
So when people, because you're Walmart, only focused, so you have brands come over from Amazon. What does that transition look like? I shouldn't say transition, but I think you know what I mean. Like,
Yep.
If you're going to all of a sudden jump onto Walmart, obviously you already have assets, you have product descriptions, you have bullet points, you have videos, you have, how do people then jump into any of these platforms? And what do you see as the most common things you're doing with that data? Like, how are you, like Reese Whistling, are you changing the product description, the bullet points, the images, like all that stuff? Like,
that's a great question.
Yeah.
So the path that we kind of go about is that once we work with a brand, especially if they're an Amazon native brand, they have all their listings. We get to understand the products and how they talk about their products. Once we know that, we actually go through a few-step process where we understand the keywords that are bringing volume on Walmart. They're oftentimes very different than the ones bringing Amazon. There's obviously crossover, but there's differences. So understanding those, once we have a really good understanding of what those are and what we plan on going for to target, now we start writing the listings. We completely rewrite the listings, title, descriptions, key features, front end of listings. Walmart has different style guides that make a difference for how well you rank. Now, it's very important that, like, Walmart has a style guide and they say how they want stuff, but it's not about following exactly the way that's said, because there's also SEO best practices that are a little bit different. So it's a balance of like making sure it's optimized for Walmart's best practices, as well as SEO best practices, as well as what Walmart wants to sort of say in their style guides. That's a big part of it. I would say that's like 60% of it, 40% of it, of the work, which sometimes has even a bigger impact, is the back end of listings. Walmart's trying to build a really strong, well-organized catalog. And in order for that, they need a lot of details about a product. So there's a lot of attribute fields that they incentivize you for building out. People ignore a lot of those attribute fields, but they make a big difference. The way categories are structured on Walmart, there's a few levels of categories. So there's like product type, category, and category path. A lot of times, like certain products are like, should they be in this category or that category? It can make a really big difference based on the search volumes of certain categories, but based on how the competition in certain categories, how well you're indexed in there. So understanding the different categories your product could fit into, and then making sure you're in the right one. You could open up cases with Walmart to make sure you're in the right one. So there's that portion of it. It's really, Walmart made it a gamified system to help simplify it, where it's something called LQS, listing quality score, where on the Walmart dashboard, it'll tell you a lot of these things you need to do. It doesn't go in like full detail, but like it already gives you a lot of insight into the things you have to do. So it's a longer conversation, but there is a lot you could do on that front. And that's usually the first kind of stage of what we attack. We believe if you build a really good foundation on Walmart, all the other efforts you do just go way further. And we've seen it time and time again. It's just, people jump to kind of do the advertising, do this, do that. There's so many. Walmart wants a strong customer experience. So they make that you're not going to be successful in advertising unless your listing has good conversion rates and has a good customer experience. So you're not going to be able to scale up in that way. So many things are tied to that. So that's kind of been a big key focus of ours.
Is the amount you're spending in paid media tied to like how they adjust your scoring at all?
Not on the main listing quality score, but the amount you spend in media will have a difference to your ad relevancy, and how much you could spend on like new placements, new advertising, things like that. But it's less based on how much you're spending. It's not for hourly, like your listing quality. It's more about how the quality of your listing overall. Like that's what your listing quality score is, like just the quality of your listing, back end and front end.
Awesome. I'm making some notes here because I have another question, but something tells me we're going to come up with a list of a follow-up episode to publish a week after this one. That's what I'm coming up with right now. I mean, surprise, surprise. It's, understand the Walmart ecosystem can't be done in 35 minutes. But I'm also sitting back and I'm thinking, if I'm a brand, like, how do I know if it's worth it? I don't know if there's certain categories, brands come to you, I'm sure, all the time. And then like anything else, you're probably doing an evaluation as well. Like, just having that honest conversation, like actually your category is not really good, or wow, your category is, kicking butt, taking names. We can jump in and really help you here. Is Are we seeing that? I mean, I guess we are seeing it at Walmart, but are those categories sticking out, or are we getting to the point where, hey, outside of like fresh food, like everything's taking off at this point in time?
Yep. So great question. There is things to understand about categories and things that we could dive into a little bit. Now it depends a lot on obviously the type of products you're carrying, right? So when we look at certain categories, I'll just kind of talk through them quickly and it'll give some insight. If you think about hard lines, right? So sports, patio falls under hard lines. There's a lot of different accessories and things fall under hard lines. Those are high volume categories. They do really well. Within those bring a ton of volume, and Walmart has significant market share in hard lines in general, compared to other marketplaces. That being said, in order to compete properly in that category, within those categories and subcategories, there is certain subcategories that have less penetration, right? And that's what you have to really look for. What we look for is there less sellers there? Or sometimes there's a ton of sellers, but there isn't a lot of sellers hitting certain price points or hitting certain price points. So it's usually kind of one of those. So understanding if it's a big category, once it's a big category, like is there opportunity because there's not enough sellers, or is there opportunity maybe because they're not hitting the price points, right? And if you fit into kind of one of those, then you're good to go. So meaning obviously anybody fits into the bucket of like, if there's not enough sellers, like you could be a great other seller there, but price point, might be relative, right? If you're just if there's a ton of sellers and there are a lot of high price points and you're also at a high price point, it's going to be really hard. So hard lines is important to kind of understand. Walmart has significant market share of. Home is the largest, if I'm not mistaken, right? So for Walmart, so there's on the .com side of things, obviously grocery is massive for Walmart, but I'm saying on the .com side of things, home is huge. The volumes we see on home are ridiculous. They'll shock people if you're done well. Now within home, within furniture, for example, like I was just in a meeting with Walmart, like, there is some categories where they have, beds are huge. They're the biggest for them, right? But there's a lot of competition of beds. If you think about like bar stools, for example, there's a lot less competition in bar stools, but still a lot of demand for bar stools, right? So it's like there's understanding within there. There's, and if you just look on Walmart, you'll get a good idea of the space. But if you think about, the way I look at Walmart is most people aren't doing it well, right? So if you go in there and you're doing everything well, you shouldn't be that concerned about ranking to the top of placements. We're usually able to rank to the top of placements for any keyword, any item, as long as the item is good and the price point's good. So if you're coming in with a good price point, you just want to go after the big categories, because even if there's a lot of competition, like if you're doing everything right, you'll still kill it. If you're trying to take it as a secondary approach, you're not going to make, because that obviously you're going to be outbeat by competition. But that's kind of the way we look at it. If you're in health and wellness, sorry, go.
No. I'm just thinking, like, do you help people with this as a whole? Like, I'm just thinking, it's hard if you haven't been in the ecosystem. So brands come to you, and is that some of the first part? Like, you just jump in and say, hey, are you able to help them with this evaluation? Or they say, hey, I don't even know my total opportunity. And you're able to come in, take a look at their products and say, like, hey, this is massive, or hey, this is small. Is that something you're doing? Because a lot of people are having this question right now, or they're already there and they're not winning and they're thinking, what am I doing wrong? Or am I doing nothing wrong? Right? It's almost that I just want to know where I'm at so I can know, like, am I at the top or am I at the bottom? Is my category huge and I'm selling a little? Is my category small and I'm selling a lot? That number could be the same as sales, but depending on overall potential in the category and in category size, changes strategy, changes internal conversations with executive teams who are saying, why aren't you winning? Why aren't you building more? Why aren't you growing on Walmart? You can say, actually, we've got 9 number 1 bestsellers, right? That type of thing.
Yep, exactly. It's a great point. That is the kind of the process we go through in the beginning, because our model is more of like a partner model where we don't make it too much risk for brands to work with us. So it only makes sense. We only make huge money usually if a brand's with us for a while. So for us, it's very important to understand kind of the opportunity. And for a lot of brands, like, we'll tell them this is the opportunity. For example, a lot of brands in health, wellness, beauty, we'll tell them the opportunity, and the sales volumes aren't that much, right? But a lot of times it will make sense for us to work with them because they have other goals. Like, they're planning, they want to control their brand on the platform, or They still want that added extra revenue. They want to be there as the marketplace grows. And then if that aligns with their goals, then that's fine. And then we know that it could be a long-term relationship. But if their goals are like they need to hit, $500,000 a month within a certain amount, within 6 months for it to be worthwhile for their resources, then it's for a lot of those brands, it won't be a fit. But in home, for a lot of those brands, like it might be a great fit. So it's a lot about understanding that. And like, that's usually the first stage where we go through is like understanding the brand, seeing, getting an idea internally of the opportunity, and from there, seeing how that works.
Yeah. I mean, it could be, you're right, brand protection. It could be, I want to get on store shelf. Yep. And it might just be one product to start, right? It could be a sales number, right? It's then identifying internally the strategy. What do you want to get out of this relationship as a whole? And it's interesting that that's changing rapidly, and people have to look at it that way, because that's exactly how people's mindset have changed over Amazon. I mean, they're talking to 20 or 30 brands a week. And that's, start up the Fortune 100, everybody, up every vertical pretty much. And that's, I would say, a major thing that's shifting is, Amazon, not viewing Amazon as that strictly a sales channel, but hey, how can I use Amazon in the exposure I get there to advance what my goals are? And then adjusting my Amazon strategy to that. You're going to have to do that same thing with Walmart. And if you can do that, then you're going to get these exponential gains that other people aren't, because they're approaching the platform the wrong way.
100%. Yep.
Wow. No, this is fun. Are there other things top of mind? I do think that we're going to have to do a follow-up. So some of the things that I wanted to do, like I think is going to be a follow-up episode. I do want to pick your brain and make sure that we catch anything else we need to in this episode, is more of a winning on Walmart.com, right? And what does that look like? And I think we've kind of pulled some of that, but I want to dive deeper. Hey, identify your strategy, right? Identify, the total market, size, the price point, the content, the interaction, the paid media. I mean, unwrapping the paid media side of Walmart is going to be a good chunk. But it's almost like we're going to do another one that follow up this one, winning on Walmart.com. And what does that strategy look like? Are there other things like on this kind of, understanding Walmart.com that we still need to get to in the next, 5 minutes or so?
Yeah. So just a couple thoughts. I think if you haven't been successful on Walmart, it's really important to dive into it and understand why. And we see this with brands all the time. A lot of brands are on Walmart already. It's just they haven't been successful. And it's, sometimes they're convinced it's because there's not enough volume, and sometimes they're right, but usually it's not the case. Maybe it's not as much as they wish for or hope for, or this or that, but it's usually, it's a lot more than they think. So I would say, like, it's really, you have to get to the core of understanding why and how to properly approach Walmart. And kind of in the next episode, we'll talk through a lot of the tactics you could do to kind of position yourself really properly on Walmart. But we see this all the time, and some issues, and for some brands and some products, it's a much quicker process. For some brands, it's a little bit of a longer process. Depends on a lot of variables. But we've seen some crazy results, and like I just have a anecdotal point from like an item that was a brand new item that was launched on Marketplace. It was doing under 20,000 a month in sales. Over Black Friday, Cyber Monday, it did close to 1.5 million in sales just within the weekend on a Marketplace item. That outdid all the 1P items and all that, just because the Marketplace team worked with the brand on getting really good placement. We promoted with the right advertising, and, it was a great product, and that's, like, there is significant volume going to these Marketplace items. And we're seeing it across a lot of different categories, a ton of different growth, but it's just, the approach makes a really big difference. And understanding your goals, understanding, like, usually to wrap up to those goals, a lot of teams can't do it internally, or it takes more time and resources and costs to do it internally. There could be partners you could use for full integration. You might just looking for a smaller partner for certain things. Like there's a lot of ways to address it. I think it's really important just to understand what you're looking for, your goals, and I'm more than happy to chat with any brands, even if they're not ready to work with just about that.
No, it's awesome. I mean, how do people get a hold of you as a whole? I mean, as a follow-up to this?
Yeah, so I'll just give my email. I like anybody can email me, honestly. I try to get the things as quick as I can. I love talking things about brands and strategy. So it's like Michael@SellCord.com. You can just email me, Michael@SellCord.com, and SellCord.com. Or you can fill out a form on our site, SellCord.com, and you could, you just request to speak to my team or myself. You can just put in the note and it'll get forwarded to me. And yeah, we could kind of discuss and see, learn about your brand. If you want Walmart or you have questions or want to learn about the opportunity or whatever the case might be, like down to chit chat.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's kind of why we hit it off is we had that same conversation. We'll just have a conversation with anybody. Like at this point in time, like it's just fun. There's something to learn from everybody. Well, Michael, thanks so much for your time today. We're going to find a time to do a follow-up to this one. So hopefully it'll post the week after this one does. The winningonwalmart.com, where we kind of tackle all those things I mentioned earlier. With that, we're going to wrap up this episode of the Digital Deep Dive. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Thanks, Michael, for your time today. We'll be in touch. Record the next one as well. Alrighty. Thanks, my friend.
Awesome. Thank you.